Hello and welcome to Next Generation Dast. My name is Andrew Garrett and I am a Product Marketing Manager here at Micro Focus Fortify. In this presentation, I'll be discussing Dynamic Application Security Testing, also known as Dast, in modern application security. So with that, let's get started. First, let's go over today's agenda. First, we'll discuss why Dast. Why is it important? Then we'll talk about Fortify Dast specifically and our WebInspect solution. Then we'll talk about why Dast complements SAST and how the two work together to create a more holistic AppSec solution. We'll also talk about the importance of shifting Dast left and also the evolution of Dast. And then the meat of today's presentation will be around WebInspect and what's new in WebInspect 20.2. So first off, why is Dast important? So Dast, as I mentioned, stands for Dynamic Application Security Testing. The primary difference between static and dynamic is that static is looking at source code. Dynamic is different. We're actually scanning a running application. So if you can open that application in a browser, we can cover it with Dast. Dast is also known as the process of analyzing a web application through the front end to find vulnerabilities through simulated attacks. This type of approach is also known as an outside-in approach. It evaluates the application by attacking the application like a malicious user would. After a Dast scanner performs these attacks, it looks for results that are not part of the expected result set and identifies security vulnerabilities. You can see the pros of Dast listed above. Number one, it's independent of the application. Number two, it immediately finds vulnerabilities. Number three, it does not require access to the source code. The cons of Dast, while it does not require access to the source code, this also means it does not find the exact location of a vulnerability in the code. Also, some security knowledge is needed to interpret these reports, and the test can be time-consuming. Why Fortify Dast? Fortify's Dast solution is called WebInspect. WebInspect delivers comprehensive coverage. I've highlighted 6 areas on the slide here. First, dynamic application testing. It offers comprehensive dynamic web application testing with the breadth of coverage needed to support modern applications. Number two, you can see some security and compliance standards listed there. These pre-configured policies and reports for major compliance regulations, including the PCI DSS, OWASP, HIPAA, and many more. To see all of the security compliance standards, you can always visit the WebInspect documentation guide for a complete list. Number three, powerful scanning integrations that enable API and single-page application testing at scale. Number four, automation and workflow integrations help meet the needs of DevOps. You can monitor trends and use dynamic analysis to take action on vulnerabilities. Number five, shifting Dast left. You can drive fast and highly focused results earlier in the SDLC with custom scan policies and incremental analysis support. And last but not least, ScanCentral Dast. We'll touch on this in depth a little later on in the presentation. But basically, ScanCentral Dast is a centralized platform that allows you to run hundreds or even thousands of scans, which gives dev teams the ability to run dynamic scans on their own. By using ScanCentral Dast as an orchestration platform, a small team of AppSec professionals can support an entire organization. So comprehensive scanning finds more vulnerabilities. WebInspect has the broadest Dast coverage and detects new types of vulnerabilities. You can scan basic APIs in seconds with support for OpenAPI. And for more advanced API scanning scenarios, Use WebInspect's Postman integration to support unique workflows, complicated authentication, and custom parameter requirements. So now let's talk about SAST plus Dast and why this makes sense with Fortify. So number one, holistic AppSec. You can launch both SAST and Dast from Fortify Software Security Center. You don't have to decide between one or the other. Users have the flexibility to run any combination of static and dynamic scans. Number two, constant remediation guidance. A common vulnerability description allows developers to spend less time researching vulnerabilities and more time remediating. Number three, prioritization. Overall security is enhanced as the unified taxonomy enables customers to focus on the most important findings first. Number four, layered defense. By leveraging static analysis early in the SDLC and dynamic analysis later in the SDLC and into production, security teams can deliver greater security. Number five, organizations that identify vulnerabilities early in the SDLC and continue to detect them in production can focus resources on addressing systematic problems. So let's talk about shifting left. Why is it important to shift Dast left? You can see that 42% of firms that experienced attacks are still being exploited through software vulnerabilities. This is according to a Forrester State of Application Security Report 2020. A large amount of data breaches are still occurring in applications, so the continued need for application security is still as relevant as it's ever been. There are still issues with applications that we need to solve as early as possible. The business need for shifting left. Number one, accelerating time from design to deployment as work is done in parallel and handoffs between functions are minimized. Reducing costs of rework is another benefit since problems are identified and fixed earlier. And also, there's a greater awareness amongst developers of the quality and testing requirements of the organization. There's a continued need for organizations to shift their security testing left. And here's a graphic that illustrates this point. The traditional model of when Dast was done was in deploy and release. But just as the movement for shifting SAST left is in the development and build stages, the same thing is happening with Dast. Obviously, we can't shift Dast left as far as SAST because you need a running application with Dast. But there is still a movement to shift it earlier than it has been. So you're getting the benefits of the earlier you find a vulnerability, the cheaper it is to fix. So how are we solving that using Fortify WebInspect? Well, we focused on that heavily in our 20.2 release. And let's talk about that now. What's new in 20.2? So let's start with the core updates. In terms of core updates, it should probably go without saying, but the core updates are the most important things we do. The AppSec market is full of technologies with no substance and, well, a lot of marketing. But our focus on the core is really what sets us apart. And, it's something that we're proud of at Fortify. In particular, as you look over the last couple of releases, so today, every single one of the features on that right side of your screen there means one thing. It means we can scan and detect vulnerabilities. I always say this when looking at our roadmap. If you can't scan the app, nothing else matters. So let's talk about some of the features specifically. Number one, we have Engine 5.1. In terms of performance, we basically created a feedback loop with Fortify On Demand support and sales enablement. So they've been providing us with feedback from customers about areas where maybe we're missing things or the performance isn't quite there. In this 20.2 release, the performance is dramatically improved. And you'll see that in the scans. We've got faster results and better coverage. We used benchmark applications like WebGoat and DVWA. We took the time to scan those apps with the latest build of WebInspect, and that provided feedback to the WebInspect team to improve things like UI crawl and auditing, so it improved the product. But it also had the effect of providing people in the field with samples of scans for intentionally vulnerable apps and notes around the potential tuning that some of those scans may or may not need. And we did everything we could to eliminate tuning as much as possible. A lot of our features are all about auto tuning because we know the days of a user having time to tune a scan are basically behind us at this point. Another important highlight, single page application, or SPA, auto detect. In the previous release, in particular with Engine 5.0, we supported scanning single page apps, and our coverage was much improved. The number one request we got from customers, though, was, hey, I don't know when I'm scanning a single page app. So now with SPA auto detect in this latest release, this is a hugely important feature. Now you point WebInspect at the application, it will detect if it's scanning a single page app, and it will automatically switch into a mode that will support scanning a single page app. You can also still manually turn it off if necessary, but the default is automatic. This results in the best findings and the best scan times. Next up, we have ADFS CBT. Again, along the lines of core capabilities, if you can't log into the app, obviously if the app requires authentication and you can't log into it, nothing else really matters. Scanning that login page doesn't get you much. Shortly after our 20.1 release, we got some feedback from the field that there was a new type of authentication that we weren't supporting. So Microsoft had pushed down a recommendation to all of their ADFS customers that they should enable what they called extended protection. And part of extended protection was enabling what's called a channel binding token, or a CBT. What a CBT does is break SSL proxies. So it essentially breaks a man-in-the-middle proxy, which is basically what WebInspect does. So we delivered a patch that brought support for this, and we're obviously committed to providing automatic support for all these types of authentications, and ADFS in particular is becoming more and more popular. Next up, we have OpenSSL. So network administrators are putting requirements on their environments which restrict the SSL cipher suites that the client side and Microsoft Windows supports. So they're basically saying, hey, we don't want you using these weak ciphers, meaning ciphers that are known to have vulnerabilities or weaknesses in them, and we're going to turn them off. What happens is WebInspect uses S-channel, which is Microsoft's SSL stack to negotiate SSL. So the second the systems administrator turns off those weak ciphers, that breaks our ability to detect applications that we're scanning and are using weak ciphers. But more often than that, it just completely breaks WebInspect. So what we've done this time is taken the time to integrate OpenSSL. Now we have an option to use OpenSSL engine, and we'll turn that support on. So you're no longer bound by restrictions on S-channel, and it means you should be able to scan those apps. It also provides a support for TLS 1.3, which is a big important feature. Last but certainly not least, we have redundant page detection. This is an awesome feature. What this does is it gives us the ability to scan applications where redundant content is everywhere. So if you think of a shopping cart, you might have one form that is basically a template for 1,000 products. So redundant page detection is a really easy, powerful way of fingerprinting the structure of the page and using that structure to determine redundant content. So it's page similarity threshold. So if we identify that the page structure is less than 95% the same, we'll determine that the other page is unique and crawl it as such. Now, if you're above that threshold, we'll label it as redundant. you can also change that page similarity threshold as you see fit. The big benefit with this redundant page detection is you're going to save a lot of time. A scan that used to take nearly 3 hours with redundant page detection off now takes just 33 minutes with the page similarity threshold at 95%, or just 10 minutes with it set at 50%. So when you're looking to reduce your scan times on large applications with lots of redundant content, this is a great feature. Now let's talk about ScanCentral Dast. I mentioned earlier we would go over this. As we looked at what customers were asking for, and as we saw the problems they were facing with Dynamic in general, it became pretty apparent that leveraging a tool like WebInspect running on a desktop just didn't scale. There's not enough staffing to support that. You can't get enough scans done in time. Scans aren't fast enough. It's not flexible enough. So there are a lot of challenges with a heavy tool like WebInspect sitting on a desktop. So what we did was we started integrating dynamic scanning directly into Software Security Center. So that's what ScanCentral Dast is. You may be familiar already with ScanCentral Static, which is our orchestration platform for static scanning. Right alongside that, as a separate tab in SSC, is where you can orchestrate and automate dynamic scanning at scale with ScanCentral Dast. So as you can see in the screenshot there, you now have a separate tab for ScanCentral Dast. It's built around this concept that dynamic application security testing is changing. That doesn't mean that the classic use case of a pen tester type of person using WebInspect to dig into a scan is going away. It just means that there's more that we have to do in terms of scale, in terms of providing automation and orchestration, and kind of blurring the lines between SaaS and on-prem so that those classic use cases can actually happen. This is where we come up with the idea of next generation Dast. Now, organizations can actually dedicate the resources to drill in depth into scans. So you can find demo videos of ScanCentral in action. If you actually want to see how it works, we have some demo videos available in our booth right now. So ScanCentral Dast is really our first phase of implementing that. Let's talk about the automation improvements. ScanCentral Dast is a fully containerized solution. So we're delivering a containerized license and infrastructure manager, also known as the LIM. Standing up LIM used to take, it seemed like hours. Now with Docker, standing up LIM takes maybe a minute. So it should be a really good experience for customers. The LIM allows you to use concurrent licenses, which allows for multiple instances of Fortify. So let's talk about licensing a little bit more. ScanCentral Dast licensing is completely different from what you may think of as our orchestration or collaboration platform that is known as WebInspect Enterprise. What we've basically done is flatten the licensing model. So we no longer delineate for ScanCentral Dast. We don't delineate between the enterprise type of solution, the ScanCentral Dast license, and a concurrent WebInspect license. So what that means is if you buy into ScanCentral Dast, you're using concurrent WebInspect licenses. That means if you want to use WebInspect, as this slide is showing, if you're a pen tester type of person and you're wanting to use WebInspect, you can really dig into the details of a scan. If you're the type of person that needs to do that, well, you have a license that gives you the ability to do that. If you have a ScanCentral Dast license model, they're all the same. You can be pulling a license from a license pool in the LIM, as well as the SSC integrated orchestration platform. Basically, it's a flattening of the license pool. So there's no more of this, hey, I've got WebInspect Enterprise, I've got to do this thing, but I can't do it because I can only do it in WebInspect. Artificially limiting the licensing has always been a pain point for users in the past, so this solves that. So let's talk about the Azure and Jenkins plugin. So we're extending the existing Fortify Jenkins and Fortify Azure plugins to support starting a Dast scan from the new ScanCentral Dast integration. There are a few requirements. So number one, ScanCentral Dast API URL. This is the URL which the plugin will need to communicate with to trigger the scan. Number two, ScanCentral CI/CD identifier. This is the template ID which the user will pass in that references the scan configuration that the plugin should execute. Number three, SSC authentication token, an authentication token with access to run a scan from the project version associated with CI/CD identifier. Number four, overrides, a JSON payload which allows for future extensibility. And number five, plugin writes a scan start status to the Jenkins or Azure log based on response from ScanCentral Dast API. So what's coming next? So here's our Fortify Dast roadmap. I'm just touching on this right now, but tomorrow in the technical session, we'll be diving further into 21.1 for more depth. So this is more of just a teaser to let you know what's coming tomorrow. Obviously, as much as we've improved WebInspect with 20.2, we're not stopping there. Here's a quick look at some of the highlights of what's coming in 21.1. We're working on things like an even more improved engine with Engine 6.0 and numerous other improvements, and definitely lots more with ScanCentral Dast, such as VS Code integration and functional scanning with FAST. Now, before I wrap things up, Gartner needs your help. If you are a Micro Focus Fortify user, we want to hear from you. So please share your views on Gartner Peer Insights, whether it be for WebInspect. I personally hope it's for WebInspect, but whether that's Fortify On Demand, whether that is Static Code Analyzer, SCA, we hope that you will share your views on Gartner Peer Insights. As always, the reviews are anonymous, so I would encourage you to please take a few minutes and share your views on Gartner. Also, a reminder to connect with us on social media. You can connect with our Micro Focus accounts, or if you're just interested in security, you can connect with our Micro Focus security accounts. So I encourage you to check those out. And that's all I've got for today. Thanks everyone for joining me. As I mentioned before, we'll have some technical sessions tomorrow, as well as all of the great demos we have available. I encourage you to check those out, especially ScanCentral. If you want to see how that works, feel free to check out that ScanCentral demo video. Well, thanks for joining me today, everyone. Have a good one.